The best thing comes to those who wait, I am told. And I have to say, the conductor we met tonight, I first met walking across Battersea Bridge 20 years ago. And we ended up in conversation. And he told me about this brilliant thing that he does. Not only is he a jazz musician, but he's a conductor of an orchestra, one of the most versatile musicians probably in the country, who does these extraordinary experiences that bring to life the power of music. And nowhere did I think that was more appropriate than today in the Royal Opera House. So please ask those at the entrance, come on through. There's some lovely seats here. Please come and grab some seats at the front. And there's some more seats over here. And this time I'm going to introduce you to Dominic Aldis. Dominic, thank you.
Well, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to this extraordinary event. To be seated within a symphony orchestra. You heard the opening there of Schubert's Fifth Symphony. Unbelievable to think it was composed in 1816 when he was just 19 years old. Well, it's a masterpiece, and it's a privilege to be performing that music in this beautiful space on a Sunday afternoon. And indeed, we are surrounded by an extraordinary array of talent. You're probably wondering quite why we're looking at an orchestra today. Well, of course, it's about metaphor. It's about using the metaphor of an orchestra to think about how we communicate, how we need to listen, the diversity of roles, functions, and perspectives that we have within an orchestra, what we can expect from these extraordinary musicians, and also to reflect on leadership. What should we expect from the leader or conductor of an orchestra? What is it like to play in an orchestra? What are the struggles? What are the challenges? What is the process that takes us to high-level performance? We're also going to reflect on different leadership styles and have a look at how they impact the way the musicians perform and what that says about leadership in general. And a very special thing we're going to do is to reflect on what would happen if we had no music. And in fact, we didn't have this beautiful symphony of Franz Schubert, but we were having to think a little bit more like jazz musicians. Well, that's all to come within the next 60 minutes. I think for now, it would be good for you just to meet these wonderful musicians that are with us today. Firstly, at the back, we have two horns, French horns, Derek and Martin. Thank you very much. And then we have our wind section. We have Stephanie, Helen, Esther, Linton, and Lewis. Then we have flutes, oboes, and bassoons. And then in our string section, we have right at the back, we have our two double basses, two cellos, 4 violas, and 10 violins. Well, with more time, I'd give you a chance to hear all those instruments individually. But let's, for a moment, think about how those roles are subtly different and differentiated from each other. The first thing about the horns that occurs to me is that they are extremely loud, which means that when they play, everybody hears it. So I'm very struck by the fact that we need that beautiful, clear, concise sound that's going to soar across the orchestra. And I'm also aware of the courage that you need to be able to produce such a clear sound without cracking the note at precisely the moment that we need it. So I applaud you for your courage and precision and stamina and power and ability to deliver such an incredible sound when it's required. Now, our wind, I look to you for variety, different perspectives, beauty, the subtle sound of a flute, which is different to an oboe, which is different to a clarinet, which is different to a bassoon. And what that suggests to me is that it's about creativity, different perspectives on the same themes. And the other thing I'm very aware of is they need just the right conditions to perform well. If it's too dry or too damp or too warm or too cold, they cannot produce the music and the sound that they want. So I think a lot about environment for these extraordinary musicians in our wind section. Our double basses, well, as the word suggests, the bass is providing the bass line, the underlying structure, the support, the reliability, the consistency that makes the rest of us feel secure and, if you like, empowered to perform with confidence. The double bass doesn't get to play many solos. Well, there we are. And I see Alice going, yeah, it's true. But nonetheless, I so admire the humility, the presence, the generosity of spirit that comes with someone who is there to help others to perform well. Fantastic to have our double basses. Cellos do much the same thing, though sometimes they also get to play the melody. So they're very versatile, passionate instrument. I was a cellist. Sometimes leading, sometimes following. So there's a sense of alternating between those roles. Our violas, well, what can I say, like large violins, right in the middle of the orchestra. They're like the heartbeat, the soul, the spirit, They're the natural democrats. They are the mediators between all these vast, if you like, flamboyant personalities. They're very, very sensible people, the viola players. Right in the middle of the orchestra. And I can see Morgan is agreeing with me there. There we are. And then finally our violins, divided into two sections. We have our second violins here, our first violins here. And really, second violin, second fiddle, added resources when required on the melodic line, but also sometimes alternating and playing alongside the violas and doing all kinds of interesting things within the music. And when I think of the violins, I just think of stamina. The stamina you need to play thousands and thousands of notes in a big, big symphony. They never stop. And they're also right at the edge of the stage, so they're highly visible from the auditorium. So, another thing to say about the violins, finally, is not only do they sound good alone, they are also able to blend and synchronize with each other. Well, what I'd like to do is just to get back into some music. We stopped, obviously, midway. I'm going to play just a little bit more. And afterwards, I would love to get a little bit of feedback from you. Anything that you're seeing, that you're noticing about these remarkable musicians. You might like to look around you, just study somebody very, very carefully, just to get a sense of what's going on. We have 2 microphones, and if anybody would like to say anything, please whack your hand up, and we'll try and get a microphone to you very clearly. Orchestra. I think we're going from 171. Here we go. Thank you. Would anybody like to contribute a thought about what they're experiencing this afternoon, what they're noticing about these remarkable players? Do I have a hand going up anywhere? This gentleman here. Can we get a mic? Steph is going to bring a mic to you straight away. If anybody over here wants to put a hand up. Hi.
So it was wonderful, but if you allow me, I was going to share an observation on yourself.
Oh, on me? Oh my God.
The disclosure is that very early in my life, I once was a choir master, so I'm always looking at conductors. What I like is your minimal gesture. Apparently, you've got an understanding with the orchestra where a minimal gesture is just the right thing to do to make them play this beautifully.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that thought. So, we are going to talk about, indeed, non-verbal communication, the minimal gestures that I'm using to try and have some impact on the music, the way the musicians are playing, the choices they're making. Anybody else? 2 or 3 more comments. Gentleman here. Hi.
I sat down here 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, and he welcomed me, which is so warm and so nice. I thought I would say hi, but he anticipated, and that's fantastic. Made me feel like home next to him.
Great. So, I'm glad you've been made to feel very welcome by our marvelous horn player, and you're obviously becoming friends very quickly, which is lovely. Lady here would love to say something. Thank you.
I was noticing how everyone's playing absolutely in sync, but your expression and your movements were very independent and nuanced and different, so it felt like you could express yourselves while also being in synergy. Very good. Absolutely, indeed. So that having to be able to do those things at the same time in a way is a form of multitasking. Somebody else here? Yeah, hello. Microphone coming your way.
I've played very badly in an orchestra before, but I think the hardest thing I found was focusing on the music, which is super complex, but also keeping an eye on you to know where you need to come in. And I was just trying to figure out how on earth are these musicians doing that? Because it looks easy, but it must be super hard.
Great question. So, how is it possible to be focused on the task in hand, which indeed is to interpret the music, but yet to be able to check in perhaps with those around you, and indeed perhaps whatever I'm doing or not doing up on the podium? And I would say the answer to that is peripheral vision, isn't it? There's that sense that you can be quite focused on a task, but if you're present and aware of what's going on to your left and right, in fact, you can take in quite a lot of information. So that's sort of what's happening. Notice the players are not going like this all the time, looking at the conductor, because they're having to read the music. But what they are doing is just occasionally glancing up, and you've got that sense that they can sort of see this little piece of wood, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. One more comment from here.
So I was noticing after what you said, the divergence of the wood section, that they seem to be off doing their own little thing,
Yeah.
but it blended in. There was a rhythm everywhere else, but they did their own thing in a way.
They're doing their own thing. And indeed, we could reflect on the fact that the music itself is in a constant state of change, isn't it? Moments when it's as if everyone is going off in different directions, and then other moments when everything is just suddenly coming together, and it seems so obvious that everything would come together. We have one more last question from the back.
Quick comment and then a question. So, love the metaphor, right? So relevant. And then the way you've explained how each individual section is so different, but then they make something so beautiful together. So, from my perspective, not being a musician, they're looking at you, they're looking at music. Are they listening to each other as well?
Yeah.
What makes them go together so well?
Interesting question. I would say this is a great place to move forward, because there are two things that we need to think about. The first is preparation. Every player of this orchestra is an expert in their field. They've spent a lifetime perfecting their skills, their ability to interpret different music, and of course we come together, as we did this morning, at 11 a.m., in a rehearsal studios across the river for 2 hours to put together this performance. And that's London for you, isn't it? Just the quality of musicians that can come together and suddenly find their role, their place, and be able to work together so flawlessly. The other question is perhaps what I could perhaps bring to this party. And what is it that I might bring to this party? Well, I'll tell you what it is. The hardest thing about playing in an orchestra is you cannot always hear yourself. And of course, we're talking metaphor here. When there's so much going on around you, left and right, music, instruments, coming, starting, stopping, you're asking yourself, am I in time? Am I in tune? Am I playing too loud or too soft? Very, very difficult. So you think to yourself, perhaps the logical extension of that question is, might it be helpful to have someone who is a little external to be able to give us some feedback about how we're sounding? And I would say that is the essence of my role, is to be there as somebody the orchestra can trust, to give them feedback about how they're sounding, and in the very first stage, to provide a pulse that we can all follow. Because I'll tell you, it's quite difficult for David over here to actually be able to see Lois over here. So how can they possibly play together? Difficult, isn't it? So what about having someone who is up on the podium with this little baton, providing a pulse? And as you rightly said, this is a silent gesture. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Now, the moment the orchestra starts to play in time, it will sound better, believe me. What else can we do to improve the quality of the performance, and that somehow I could perhaps have some contribution to make? Well, everybody's got their own idea about how the music could be played. Some people want to play a little louder, some a little softer, some faster, some slower. So let's try and bring some coherence and some consensus to that. Let's just decide we're all going to play softer, we're all going to play louder, we're all going to play with a little bit more precision or with a little bit more intensity. This is all about non-verbal communication, isn't it? About what you can convey and express just through how you use your eyes, you move, you look around, and you make people feel part of the experience. Well, to give you a real sense of that, you know what I'd like to do? I'm going to bring some people up onto the podium. No, you've already been on a podium. You're not allowed to come onto the podium. Would you like to come up onto the podium? Just come up onto the podium. Why don't you come up? Just come and stand on the podium. There's nothing else to do. Okay, the podium is yours. So, because I just want you to get a sense of what it's like up here. So I'm going to come down on the floor. Please, don't be shy. All right. Okay, orchestra. 2, 3, 1. Here we go. Are you okay? Happy? Good. Here we go. There was a microphone there a minute ago. It seems to have gone. Can I have it back? Is there a roving mic somewhere? Can I have that one? Thank you so much. I want to get some feedback. Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
How is it up here?
Oh, it's a brilliant view, I have to say. Hello, everyone. So, just a couple of impressions. What struck me, one thing, I wanted to chime in with you, actually. And then I was drawn just in this 180 degrees, where I just wanted to look around and just follow what was happening on that. And I was, in my head, sort of thinking the parallel to business, for which we're here, of
Indeed.
course, is how wonderful it would be if every leader could just see his or her orchestra and took the time to bring people together, what is the ultimate form of collaboration.
Wow.
So those were the things going through my head.
I love it. So your point is about visibility and the extent to which leadership becomes effective when it's visible.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do it behind screens when you can't see people and they can't see you.
Yeah.
So in a way, the podium represents a location where you can see everyone and everyone can see you.
Yeah.
And I think there's something metaphorical, if you like, in that, which is significant. The importance of having an invisible thread, if you like, to everyone within your team.
Yes, and I just reflecting on that, if I may add, is having the counter-inspiration through that.
The energy coming at you from your...
Yeah, because we expect our leaders to inspire, but this is the moment to stand and think, oh my goodness, isn't that wonderful when you have a functioning team, and it all sounds amazing.
Your hand on the mic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. It's actually, I found it initially quite overwhelming and intense to be standing here. But there was a point where I looked up And it's amazing how consistent and collaborative and calm you become when you look up and look away from it. And then you look back down and it's quite an intense, you can't keep up with it.
Wow.
So it's quite overwhelming, but very similar to Berta, you sort of get into the rhythm of it. It's amazing to be part of it.
So the location, what's coming at you, is quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
You feel the responsibility.
Big responsibility.
You feel all this energy, all this expectation.
Yep.
You're there to provide energy, if you like, intensity, drama, excitement,
Yep.
clarity, but yet you've also got to be present, listening, responding. It's a precious place to be.
It was. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
I would probably say I was trying to figure out what my role here is.
Sorry, say that again.
What is my role here?
What is your role? Okay.
Because everybody here was so passionate, and
Yeah.
it looked like they knew what they were doing, and I could probably just stand here and appreciate it rather than add anything or direct them anywhere.
Well, your modesty and humility is greatly appreciated by the orchestra, I'm sure. Indeed, when you are with high-level professionals, it does seem that perhaps there's a little less to do, or at least it's just an adjustment here, adjustment there. And my thought there is not thinking about, can you do this, can you do that, it should be like this, it should be like that. It's sort of saying, this sounds terrific, how can I help? You know, which is a slightly different approach, isn't it? Just sort of the nuance, the adjustments, rather than sort of overhaul entirely. Well, thank you so much. So round of applause for our lovely contestants. Thank you. Well, just in terms of gesture, styles of communication, how I express myself, what is going on in my mind while I conduct the orchestra. What I'd like to do now is I would like to conduct for you the same passage of music 3 times. And in each time, each example, I'm going to behave very differently. So we could call it Maestro 1, Maestro 2, and Maestro 3. And what I'd love to do is I'm going to ask you, after Maestro 1, what words come into your mind when you see this person on the podium. So we'll do that, and then you'll hear Maestro 2, then Maestro 3. It's a little bit of the minuet, and you're going to experience, I hope, 3 very contrasting leadership styles or personalities, and then we're going to talk about it. Thank you. Okay, maestro number 1, just shout out a word. What's that? My way or highway. I like that. Disconnected. What's that? Aggressive. Directive. Micromanaging. And that's from a musician. I love it. Wow. Maestro 2. Disengaged. Boring. Unclear. Bored. Irrelevant. Love that. Maestro 3. Inclusive. Wow. Energizing. Empowering. Engaged. Happy. Yes. Is it not fascinating how much you can express non-verbally to affect the way people feel? For me, the first example was all about what's going on in my head, a sort of sense in which I thought I had all the answers. You know, why can't they do what I want them to do? You know, it was this sense of almost self-aggrandizement that if I do more, more's going to happen. And it simply doesn't work out that way. Certainly not if you're conducting a 1-hour symphony. The second one is, as you say, it's disengaged. And I would say also it's the abuse of a privilege. You know, whenever I stand on a podium and have an opportunity to make music with such wonderful people, I think of it as a privilege. And really, to be so disengaged, to be so lackluster and uninterested and unfocused is really insulting to the expertise and indeed the beauty of the music that we are here to perform. For me, the third one is all about sharing, it's about empowering, it's about trusting as well. It's about saying, I trust you and I'm here to help, if you like, transform what might be an ordinary performance into an extraordinary performance. And indeed, that takes time, but indeed, I do think when you are up here on the podium, you can really have some real impact. Well, we have time for a few more questions. Anything that you'd like to ask or say or share about the role of the conductor? And indeed, I'd love to get a bit of feedback from the musicians as well. Hi. If anybody here wants to put their hand up, we'll get a microphone to you quickly. Hello.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And well, to the unmusical ear, I couldn't hear really a difference between performance 1 and performance 3, even though your style was very different. And this is the debate which we often have in business. You know, I get results by being directive, micromanaging, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
So my question to you is, what difference do you take away when you go for style 3 in terms of the performance and contribution you get from the musicians?
I'll tell you how I'd answer that. I think you're right to say that there are different levers that you need to have in different situations. You know, when we're under a lot of time pressure, for example, one can't be quite so collegiate and inclusive. You've just got to move quickly and make fast decisions. You can't really consult people. It's just how it is. When you have a lot of time, you can perhaps try different scenarios, get more buy-in from everyone. So there are different situations. For me, I think one of the fundamental differences between the first and the third is about how sustainable it is. You know, for me, the first one, okay, I can come up with all my bravura and sort of charisma and drive and energy, and everybody thinks, oh, wow, it's so exciting. But how does it feel after 10 minutes, in musical terms, 15, 20 minutes? At what point do the musicians just start to screen you out and they're just trying to save the performance, irrespective of this nutcase that's up there on the podium? Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas the third one, I would suggest there are moments of that intensity and drama, But there are times when you just stand back and you just let the musicians express themselves. So I think it gives you more choices. Any other thoughts? Hi. Hello.
I'm assuming your style fits with Maestro 3 and that's part of your personality. But I'm wondering, where does that come from? If I'm right or if I'm wrong, let's assume Maestro 3 might fit you, although I think you're trying now. You're deceiving me right now.
I aspire to Maestro 3 at least.
But I'm also assuming there are conductors and maestros that fit style 1, 2, and 3, fortunately or unfortunately. So where does it come from for you to be so open with your team, let's say? What about your musical education might have influenced that, if anything, or is it partly your personality?
You know, I just wish we had so much more time to talk about this, because it's so fascinating what you're saying. And indeed, you're right. I would just say briefly, of course, there is a historical context. If we went back 50 years, if you like, what should we say, the cliche of what a conductor was somebody very dictatorial and authoritative, usually male, as you can imagine. And gradually, things change and we evolve. And of course, it's a different world now. And it's more inclusive, it's more diverse, and thank goodness for that. And what's so fascinating is to observe that process through the universal language of music. You know, just to think about how you could perform this same music with so much diversity, if you like, and different temperaments, different approaches, different values, and think about how it sounds. And that's the power of metaphor, in a way, is it opens up precisely those kinds of conversations. One more comment.
Hi.
Somebody. This lady over here. Can we get the microphone right here? Okay, then one, and then that'd be lovely. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Just curious to know, how do you pull your team together and what do you look for beyond just the musical expertise? Because you create something so beautiful, and everyone yet maintains their unique talent, but together it's so beautiful. So what mindsets, characteristics you look for beyond just their expertise?
Well, the same things you look for. Professionalism, courtesy, generosity, reliability, an interest to collaborate, flexibility, enthusiasm, punctuality. You know, these are all the values. But what's so wonderful is that I've worked with these musicians for more than 15 years in different scenarios rather like this. And of course, you build trust. And trust is the most valuable thing of all. And it always makes it a pleasure to come together and make music. One more comment.
I just had a question around how much do you flex your style depending on if you like, the experience of the individual players and how much time they've spent together as a unit?
My style? Hugely. I mean, I travel around. If you suddenly find yourself in a situation with an orchestra which is much less experienced, it's a whole different experience, isn't it? You have to think about essentials, what's achievable within the time you have available. Maybe you've got to play the music more slowly. Maybe you've got to choose a different piece of music. There are lots of things you have to think about. My answer to that question would be, that is what experience gives you. It gives you strategies. It's in the moment. I arrived in this hall. We suddenly had to make this happen in 30 minutes. That's experience. Is what are the priorities and how you're going to make it work. So I don't know how to answer that beyond that. With more time, I'm sure we'd find all kinds of other things to say. What I'd love to do is just get a comment or two from the musicians about those three musical personalities. Anybody have anything to say? Oh, great. I just introduce you to Antonia. She's the leader of the orchestra, my co-pilot this afternoon.
Hi there. I was just almost going to say an answer to the lady over there who was saying she couldn't tell much difference between 1 and 3. And I get that because it was a short extract, but I would say that probably if you were going to sit through a whole symphony of that style, you might start to see tiny bits of pilot error creep in amongst the orchestra, because there were moments when he was so heavy-handed, I sort of started to panic and almost made the wrong kind of tone or started a note early, for example, or something. And these are very fine details that we made a great product with the first conductor, and it was perfectly professional, but it's not the highest level of finesse that we can achieve, which we can get with Conductor 3.
Thank you for that. I love that sense of attention to detail, just getting beyond good to excellent. Linton, love to hear from you. Hi. Thank you so much, Linton.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. You talked about sustainability. Whilst you might get a result initially, in the long term, no orchestra would want to stay with somebody with that much ego and somebody who wants that much control over you, because eventually the relationship will just erode away. And whilst you might get a great product to start with, you'd probably have people leaving the orchestra, you'd probably have a bit of infighting, but with the third conductor, that relationship is sustainable. But also as well, you've got to remember that when we step onto the platform, we're all under a lot of pressure. So if you're sensing that pressure from the person who's supposed to be leading you, actually what's going to happen is more and more mistakes are going to start to creep in, because that energy travels across the orchestra. Whereas if you've got somebody who steps up confidently, and even, I can't tell you the difference it makes if you've got a big solo coming up and you've got the red mist in front of your eyes and the conductor just gives you a smile, it changes your attitude to what you're about to do entirely.
A smile goes a long way. Thank you very much for that. Morgan, hey.
Make a comment about Conductor 2. Even in that very short excerpt, I started feeling exhausted because you were sapping the energy out of me. It's interesting because you can give so much. I felt energized at the end of number 3, and so I was able to be able to give you the whole symphony. I think after a few minutes of conductor number 2, I'd lose the will to live.
Wow, thank you so much, Morgan. I'm going to reflect on that afterwards. So. Well, we have 15 minutes or so until the end of our time together. And I want us, with this time, just to go somewhere slightly different. For years I've been asked, when doing this metaphor and comparing it to what happens within large organizations, people reasonably say, well, of course, in an organization, we don't have this beautiful symphony that's been written for us by Franz Schubert, and we know that if we get the notes right, it's all going to sound okay. And life is more complex than that, and you're having to sort of make up new music, if you like, as you go along. And indeed, that connects with my other side, which is the world of jazz. The question is, what would happen if we didn't have the plan in front of us, the symphony? Would it be complete chaos? Would it be interesting? Would it be full of creative potential? Would it just be a cacophony? How does it make you feel? How does it affect your comfort zone around certainty and uncertainty? And indeed, we would like to try and bring this to life for you now. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide you with 2 improvisations. Now, the first one is what we might call free jazz. Now, that means that I have made absolutely no musical decisions. All I'm going to do is cue the double bass to begin, and we will see and hear what emerges. It'll be what it is. And I have to tell you, it will be irrepeatable. So whatever it is, you can catch it once and then it's done, okay? We're going to follow that with something a little bit closer to jazz, because what we're going to have is a very clear pulse, like a backbeat, provided by the bass, cellos, and violas. And I'm going to invite all of our wind and brass and a few of our string players to play a very short solo. And we'll be thinking about how important it is to give people the opportunity to play a solo from time to time. And we'll be thinking about what that means. So, grab onto your chairs, and we will see what happens with our improvisation. So, what was all that about? Any thoughts? You thought the third bit was Schoenberg. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman here? Anyone else want to say anything at this point? Hi.
So, hi. When the first part of your session was, I was thinking about you as a high-performing team, being able to perform classical music.
Yeah.
And it was great stuff. Then because the concept now in business is agile team, then I thought, are they really an agile team? So can they perform jazz, improvisation, thrash rock, heavy metal, rock, etc.? you did it. Yeah? So I think we have seen, or we just saw, an agile team being able to deliver and really creating a bit of beautiful piece of music.
Fabulous. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Anything else? Gentleman over here, right at the end. Thank you.
I was thinking about psychological safety for the second piece, because obviously everyone feels really empowered and really confident and really trusting of each other and of you to be able to innovate and to be themselves.
Sure. Interesting, just perhaps on that point, is just reflect on my role, because of course what I'm not doing is providing the beat and sort of... But what I am doing is looking for things that are happening that are interesting. I'm trying to help make connections. And I would perhaps like to suggest I'm trying to create an environment in which people feel encouraged and empowered to step forward and express themselves. And that's what it is to be a jazz band leader rather than conducting the orchestra. So it's a subtle difference. Just time for maybe two more.
I was wondering whether there were any pre-agreed rules, so whether you'd agreed a key or whether that was completely...
Absolutely, sorry. Be very, very cruel of me to not be totally truthful on that. The first one was completely no rules, except one, which was, it is absolutely fine not to play. And it is also really good to stop playing. Because the trouble with improvisation is people never know when to stop. You know, it's like speaking, isn't it? You get into a flow, and it's much easier to keep talking than actually to be quiet for a moment and let the other person speak. So it was that sort of thing in the first one. In the second one, it was really just saying, that's the beat, everybody gets 4 bars. The key is A minor, as you knew already, I'm sure. Last point.
I think it was a German once said that the English don't understand music, but they like the sound it makes, and I sort of epitomised that. So I don't understand it, but I love the second piece. It was wonderful, and I'm not musical, but it struck me that there was a theme. There was a theme running through it, but there was a lot of building, but it was highly individualistic.
Great.
So there was a point to it, but it was very beautiful because of the difference.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, maybe just to sum up, for me, the first improvisation, it's a brainstorm, it's listening, it's being present, it's building on each other's ideas, it's accepting that it's not all going to be great, but there may be some great moments. And that is a slightly different mindset to what it is to be playing the classical piece. For me, the second one, it's a little bit competitive. See what other people do, and then it's your solo, you kind of want to go... Not a bad thing, but yet there's also that opportunity to let other people perform. Well, we have just time for the finale of Schubert's Fifth Symphony. Just prior to that, apart from thanking the orchestra and all of you and MindGym for this wonderful opportunity, I just want to tell you a little bit about my organization. It's called Music and Management, and Vivienne is over there, and we've got some pamphlets and a little screen and stuff. You may be interested to know that as well as this orchestra event that we do for different kind of corporate groups, conferences and the rest, we do one around jazz with a jazz group, and as you can imagine, that all talks about spontaneity, risk-taking, change. We have a nice one we call Fusion, where we have a classical string quartet and a jazz quartet on stage together, and we contrast the two cultures. One is around precision, clear execution, tradition, reliability. The other's around spontaneity and creativity. And we think about how they could make music together, how they can find common ground and collaborate. And our latest one, I'll only tell you one more, is called Transformation, which is a multicultural group, where we have an Indian sitar player, a jazz saxophone player, a classical violinist, Elodie were with us last time, and a rock drummer, myself playing the piano, and a bass player. And through 1 hour, we take a classical piece of music and turn it into a piece of jazz. Anyway, if any of that is interesting to you, I'll be around afterwards and at the drink reception, and Vivienne will also be able to give you some information. Well, I'm sure on my behalf you'd like to thank the orchestra, and I think we should give them a round of applause. Thank you.